A brief introduction on Altera. We are a real estate investment manager, investing on behalf of third-party investors, pension funds, insurance companies. Today our client base consists of somewhat 50 plus clients. We focus on residential and on retail, and within that space we focus residential lifecycle investments and retail food and convenience. Today the portfolio runs slightly towards 2.5 billion with a pipeline secured, so we'll reach 3 billion within the upcoming 2 years. Excellent performance, and we're very focused on impact investing. And today we are in GRESB, for instance, if you know this benchmark, we are the best Dutch funds for both residential and retail, and on residential we're number 3 worldwide.
Great.
As an introduction.
Super, thanks. Claire, you very kindly didn't introduce yourself at the beginning of that, so that gives you a chance to do it now.
So thank you. I'm Claire Thomas. I'm a partner at CMS in London, and I actually lead on the production of the research, so delighted to get the chance to talk to you about it. I'll leave Hein, I think, to tell you about CMS in Amsterdam, but we are the biggest real estate team in Europe, I think, so delighted to join you here today.
Excellent, thank you. Gert-Wim.
Thank you. My name is Gert-Wim, acting managing director of COD, privately owned real estate developer based here in Amsterdam. We focus on residential schemes, and that goes from student housing to the uber luxury segment, hotel, offices and conversions. We're ranked for the last 2 years as the most productive developer in the Netherlands. So please do contribute to this seminar.
I'm a real estate lawyer here in the Netherlands, and also a colleague of Clare in London. And as said, we are indeed the biggest law firm in real estate in Europe. And in the Netherlands we are not, but we are still big. We have 50 real estate lawyers and tax lawyers here acting from the Amsterdam office every day for investors, developers, all kind of real estate assets we handle. And I'm happy to host you here today.
Excellent.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Dimphy.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dimphy. I'm from the Student Hotel. I think we can say that we're one of the premier hybrid concepts in Europe, in any case, if not the world. We do student accommodation, hotel accommodation, co-working, restaurant, all under one roof. And we're an investor, developer, operator, and therefore a very comprehensive company that is growing extremely quickly. At the moment we have 13 hotels open in Europe, and our pipeline has another 38 in Europe, and we are looking to, in the next 5 years, go to 65 new hotels.
Great, thank you. Marcus.
Hello, I'm Marcus. I'm from Vijk Properties in Portugal. We are right now the relatively recent outfit, but we have the largest sized pipeline in the country. We focus mostly on residential, and we have over 500,000 square meters already on sale or coming soon over the next couple of years. And because of the size of the projects that we are doing, we interpret residential, of course, not just as apartments for people to buy or rent or live in, but actually full neighborhoods that need to be thought out and curated so that they feel natural and are attractive destinations for everybody as they integrate the wider context of the cities where they're in.
That's great. Thank you, Marcus. And so we've got a very interesting mix here of also build to rent as well as build to sell, and different business models and different experiences. So maybe just starting with you, Jaap, from the investor side, what's driving you towards residential? Because for sure there's been a significant drive towards that. Is that late cycle? Is it because we've got very low interest rates at the moment, and so therefore, it's really to do with that, the fact that most investors can't get a decent yield out of bonds, and so you're getting more capital coming into it. What's driving it?
Okay, yeah, you're quite right on the low interest rates. That's driving the appetite of the investors we work for, looking for yield, and the residential sector in itself, it's a mature sector in the Netherlands. It's been, for decades, pension funds have been investing in it. And if you look at the returns of lately, what you see in the returns is this huge mismatch between supply and demand. So in the last 4 years, it's been 15% total return on residential, non-levered, which is huge. And we do expect that this mismatch will continue for decades, because there's a lack of new stock coming to the market. Production figures are under their objectives. And again, you see the demographics and the urbanization trends kicking, and just mentioning also, let's say, the senior citizens coming in. There's a huge demand, and we don't see that the market will be able to solve this scarcity, and which is awful for each individual, but it's very positive for an investor.
And that's interesting. Gert-Wim, just from your point of view,
Yeah.
you're obviously developing, and how are you developing in terms of how much of that mix is build to sell, build to rent, and has that changed?
A couple of years ago, we started really, entering the build-to-rent market, because we saw the increase of demand when it came to housing here in the Amsterdam region. And at that moment in time, still, when selling apartments to investors, you almost have to give a discount compared to a build-to-sell apartment. That was a good thing at that time, of course, for the investor. But we see now it's almost the other way around. I mean, the investors have long-term strategies and really want to be in the city. So the differentiation between pricing in residential for build-to-sell compared to build-to-rent is almost getting at the same level. So that's an interesting phenomenon. But we also have to cope with the municipality and their regulations. And if we buy land from the city, if we can, because it's very scarce at the moment, there are strict regulations put on those projects. So we are not always free in the choice of choosing either for build-to-sale or build-to-rent. It's many times dictated by the government.
Okay, good. And maybe Marcus, just coming to you, because you're mainly in the projects in, we've mentioned before in some of the other sessions that historically Portugal has been, because of regulations that were through in the 60s and 70s, that actually that's led to, whereas you've got here in Holland, you've got much more of a mature rental market. Actually, that didn't exist in the same way in Portugal because of rent restrictions. Do you think that's beginning to change? Are you beginning to get more institutional interest as well as private buyers in terms of the schemes that you're beginning to develop, Marcos?
So let's put it that way. Portugal, in terms of rental market, was frozen for 60 years. And then in 2012, when we had the sovereign debt crisis, we went from the freezer directly to the microwave. Because all of a sudden we had the Troika coming in, and they changed the law. So what happened was that very sudden we had the conjunction of strict conditions of access to buy a home. So lots of people with no access to buying. Incentives to renovate property which had been poorly kept, and then as the crisis improved, especially from 2014 onwards, also in terms of population, and of course when you're talking rentals you're going to need the income, we saw that the economic situation stabilized and improved. So people weren't leaving as much, especially the young people, which were the ones that didn't have that access to buying. Lots of people coming to live in Portugal from abroad, and lots of Portuguese which had immigrated throughout the different stages were coming back. So this has caused now the demand for rental, which hasn't existed historically. And we, at Wijk especially, approach those because it's not our nature to be landlords. We are a developer. But because of the scale of our projects, we have thought about solutions for people who want to be, like Claire mentioned, differentiate themselves as kind of professional landlords that are going to have those solutions in place and things thought out to be an attractive proposition for the market.
Okay, good. Dimphy, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I mean, so I've been watching the student hotel since student housing was perceived as a very small niche asset class and that really wouldn't get much institutional finance, and how that's grown, and also how the student hotel has grown over that time. What do you think is driving that, and do you think it's become a much more institutional product now, particularly that blend between hotel, leisure, student housing, and now moving into co-living?
There's a lot of questions in one.
You remember them?
No, okay, so the student hotel has grown enormously quickly, and it's been driven, it's a concept that started here in the Netherlands, and it started because of lack of supply. And actually our CEO and founder is Charlie McGregor, who comes from the UK, Scotland I should say, and he comes from a relatively mature student housing market, and the Netherlands in that respect was completely immature and with respect to student housing, and as a result we entered a market where there was a lot of opportunity, the lack of supply and the lack of professionalization versus the incoming international students and growing student demand. So student housing requirements grows at around 8 to 10% a year. We have roughly 10% international students, which is our core market. So in the Netherlands, 10% international students. So therefore, you have a lack of supply versus a very high demand. And as Jaap said, that's a perfect recipe for us. So the second question, to come back to you about how that product type has developed. I mean, it was actually quite interesting for us to see how we could maximize the services available to students, and one of the ways, to make it work actually was through making contracts for students not 12 months but 10 months, and as such our product has evolved, and we saw that in those 2 additional months the hotel we rented our rooms to hotel guests. And the product evolved, and therefore, we noticed that mix of people within the student hotel was super interesting, and we're in generation, I think, 5 of the student hotel, what it is and how we've developed, and each time it becomes much more of a community of adding more products under one roof to ensure that you have the right mix of people in your building and that they keep coming back. Because that's the important thing. They come as a student, they stay as a hotel guest, and then they come, back when they start their business and work in the co-working. So it is a very interesting product. I don't think there are very many comparable products at the moment, and we are focusing very much on the community and delivering that as a service. Well, not as a service, delivering that as a USP, but also housing as a service, which is something that is catering to the market. And I think, as Claire said, it's something that is more and more in demand at the moment.
And Claire, just picking up on that point, the sort of similarities or dissimilarities, was there anything in the research around that sort of similarity between student housing, co-living, micro-living? Because you've got a lot of different areas, kind of in some ways serving the same market, but just at different age points.
Yeah, and I think something that's really come out, and I guess picks up on Dimphy's point, is we've now moved to space as a service. And I think maybe traditionally landlords just thought they were providing, you know, the bricks and mortar, and they didn't really have to worry about how that space was used. But I think now across the whole life cycle, landlords are accepting that they have to become more operationally involved. They have to see their tenants as consumers and actually really start to engage in what the occupiers want. And I think that's at every stage, whether that's student or retirement living. And I think we're a little bit behind the market in the UK in terms of the products that we provide. So that's where we're really seeing growth in the UK, is where you have landlords focused on what does the actual end occupier want from the space. So I think that's what's really changing things.
You have a much more sophisticated consumer these days that wants actually everything.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is to cater to that market as much as possible, to the digital nomads.
Digital nomads, I'm afraid I'm not one of them.
Are there already questions on your phone? Or?
That's true, yeah. And feel free, anybody, we've been terribly polite so far, but feel free to come in if you've got views to make, and that also is for everybody here. So if you've got views that you want to share, please do.
I have one for the investor and the developer, because the last week announced governmental measures from the Dutch government, and one of those is restriction for investors, that investors should be obliged to live in their investment themselves. So that seems a complicated thing, because that will limit your development. Then you are forced to sell, because what do you think about that restriction? Which can be imposed.
Are you going to have to live in all of them?
Yeah. It's timeshare, you know, every day another apartment. No, but frankly, that's really focused on the private investors who use this for their tax purposes. So what we call the box 3 investors, who disrupt the market a bit, you would say. Listen, regulation is there, it has always been there in the residential market, it will stay there. That's just fine. In the end, everyone knows regulation will not create new build residential. So also the municipalities should look to cooperate with developers, investors, and in fact they do. So you have, let's say, front-facing the regulation, and next to that we have, of course, conversations, dialogues with the municipalities how to build. Because in the end, that's the only solution there is.
Okay.
Is it hampering the investors? Yes, because investors are very risk averse, and you need to have a lot of explanation just to reassure them that residential is a core play, and it's prime, and really fits their portfolio. That's the case, and that's a bit tiring to an extent, but it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
I liked the comment, just to pick up on the comment, and your presentation from Clare, on this subscription society. I think that's also happening in the residential space, very much so. So we also switched to this, let's say, customer journey. Your age groups, what do they need? It's not just by handing in the keys on the bricks and mortar, but it's living as a service. And that's quite an extensive type of strategy we are developing, because it's really diverse on the different age groups. We think that the two of the majority age groups will be in the upcoming future, the young and the old. Because the young, they don't have the money and the means, and they want to, you have to leave your parental home, please do, in some cases. You have to find a place for yourself. Not everyone has rich parents or goes to the university, by the way. There are a lot of people just blue-collar type of working. They need to have a place to live. So that's affordability kicking in. And if I'm not mistaken, and I've done the research, 1 out of 3 citizens in the Netherlands will be a senior citizen in the next 20 years. Just imagine. And what about their income, by the way? Because their income is fixed. It's state pension, second pillar, and they might have some personal wealth that they might use to afford a living, which suits their needs, because life expectancy will quadruple. There will be in terms of there will be 4 times more 100-year citizens in the next 20 years to come. The age will rise from 85 to 90 plus. That's a lot of pension money needed just to have an income. And everything will be more expensive. Energy transition, healthcare, living, everything will be more expensive. So actually, if we don't build today, start building out for the senior citizens, we will have a huge problem in the years to come. Yeah, question. Please do.
This is Guido.
Oh, sorry, I'm Guido. We are investing and developing senior living complexes in the Netherlands, starting off in Apeldoorn. Having said so, I even think that it's more, the problem is much more complex or has more tentacles in the Netherlands. Because it's not only because these people need living space. We are at this moment still building houses for families, family houses. And in these family houses, elderly people are living. Yeah. And there's not, and how do you say, that we do not have houses now that are well enough equipped for them to leave these houses. So actually we're making the problem bigger as long as we are not building specially equipped living spaces for the elderly people.
Yeah.
So,
And what's your experience in Apeldoorn for a permit to get for these kind of houses? Is that complex? Because Amsterdam is quite flexible in this perspective at the moment.
I know, but Amsterdam has a complete different other problems, of course, different issues in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam for us is a difficult place because the prices are very high. Having said so, we started 4 years ago, and we visited more than 30 municipalities in the Netherlands. And every municipality will say it's a great idea, we love it. However, when it really comes to a point where you have to invest, you have some issues with senior living. Why? Because you need a communal space. For instance, to avoid the loneliness problem. So we need more space, more square meters to develop, which we cannot immediately commercially exploit. So what we are asking municipalities to be a little bit flexible on the building surveys for these sort of special projects. And there, although that wouldn't be a very big investment for them, it's still difficult for them to be flexible. So Apeldoorn, yeah, they love to say they loved us in the big word, but yeah, they said come in. But still, you also find that different disciplines within the municipality are not that flexible and make it sometimes quite difficult. But yeah, every municipality understands they have to do something for the elderly.
A nice thing to add maybe is I read somewhere in 2017 in the city of Amsterdam 180 permits approximately were granted for co-living concepts, but increased in the year 2018 to 600 in this city only. So that's just to stress that co-living is developing here in the Netherlands, especially in Amsterdam, rapidly.
Yeah, but that's I think Amsterdam being a very dense city, for decades, that makes sense. But I think if we extend even beyond the Netherlands, the problem is bigger because this transcends generations. It will happen in Portugal. It will happen in Ireland or another place in Europe. With this graying of the society, that you have all this existing stock, which is suitable for families, I agree, but not suitable for the lifestyle the senior people are looking for, assisted lifestyle. We need to focus on that. But enough said about that.
How do we get that 300,000 livings in the coming 4 years? Because that's what we are.
We're not. And it's. I think where
They can move, huh? We're welcoming.
Yeah. To Portugal.
Do it.
I mean,
To the microwave. We all go to the microwave. The weather is better.
I think what Jaap addressed in the beginning. I mean, there's a big issue with the supply and demand at the moment here in Amsterdam, and I think everybody sees and recognizes that we have to increase the production of new houses. And there's also enough money for that. There's a big influx of capital still in the Netherlands, so money is available to invest. But on the other hand, you see this increasing regulation by the government. You see we are at an historical high price level when it comes to cost price to making buildings. I mean, prices have never been higher than now. And what we also see is that that the municipality stacks all ambitions up on each other. So it's the highest level of sustainability, a high level of regulation, and a high land price. So, and if you combine all those things, it becomes increasingly difficult to get to that production. So we face that as a challenge as a developer, and for a investor who has its investments already here, it's a good thing. But if you are an investor and need to put your money in real estate, it's pricey. And also for the development sector, it leads to pressure on our small profit margin.
Okay, good. I mean, it's interesting the point about they could move, because you do get a lot of, obviously, Northern Europeans moving to Southern Europe for, I guess, the sort of development that you're producing in Lisbon, given that Madonna is already there. Not that she is an old age person, in case anybody's... I wouldn't like to get involved in that Twitter spat. So, are you... I suppose two questions. First of all, are you experiencing the same difficulties that we're obviously seeing here in terms of maybe regulation not helping produce this extra residential? Yours is obviously residential to buy, I accept that. And also, is a lot of this for international buyers coming in, or is it mainly domestic buyers? What's the makeup of the sort of project?
Okay, so even though we are built to sell by nature, we're open-minded about what we have in our hands. Regarding people coming in and people who are already there, of course, we've had people, I've seen situations, people moving to Portugal on medical orders, like people from Scandinavia who had their doctors tell them, we want you to spend your winter somewhere milder, for example. But even in terms of taste and the product that's available and the price point, we are very aligned with millennials, and I think we will be very aligned and are already getting very aligned with centennials, because the health infrastructure is quite good. It's easy for everybody to communicate, as the professionals speak good English, and most of the people coming, they also speak English. So Dutch would be a case, but also Scandinavians from the UK, Ireland, etc. The infrastructures are good and the costs are very low, even for health insurance. And then the quality of life that they can have, just for an average person, they can sell their family home back in Sweden or the UK, buy a smaller one, and this is what they're doing actually. Buy a smaller one with a room for a 2-bedroom with one for me, one for visits. Yeah. Like my granddaughter is coming, and with the extra cash, they get something in Portugal and they love it there. And then they spend, what we see that every year they spend more time. They go for the NHR, the non-habitual resident, and every year they spend more time. So it's not just about the formal aspect of being there for the tax purpose. In terms of millennials, we also align with those because we have a product that is still affordable, close to where they're moving naturally, especially in Lisbon, to work and live. And just that they know that moving to Lisbon and joining us there, that they will have a lifestyle that fits well with their taste. So great work-life balance, close to the ocean, close to the beaches, people are welcoming, everybody speaks English, concerts year-round, festivals. So it just fits the tastes of who these people are, and we do that in how we design some of the different solutions that we offer the market, but also in how we drive the market. It's not just catering to the market, it's actually creating something that is going to surprise and attract because it hasn't been done in a while in Portugal. Nobody had the capabilities to do it, but now we do.
Okay, good. I felt myself drifting away to a beach for a second then.
With Madonna?
I know that the partly because I met your colleague yesterday in London,
Yeah.
and I'm flying later to the Portuguese real estate event in Estoril, where your colleague will be. So is that a market that you're looking at? And I suppose, what are the key things that you're looking for when you're looking at locations to expand to? Is it about the demographics? Is it about the student population?
Yeah. So yes, we're also looking into Portugal, and in fact we've got one on site in Porto at the moment, and have secured another site in Carcavelos. So what are the key things that we're looking for? Is clearly a university city, and also a city where tourists come to. So that combination is the golden combination. Clearly, there's a number of different things that are, affect us in terms of regulation for developing what we call hotels in those locations. Regulation is an important part of one, but also the city policy. For example, in the Netherlands, what we're seeing is much more frequently is the development of the urban campus, whereby the student hotel forms part of the infrastructure of the city, and therefore becomes much more an integral part of the community. Our hotel element is usually only 20 to 40% of that building in terms of rooms, so not in terms of square meters. So actually, it really is a student-driven product that is driving, a much more connected feel to the location. So that's important, for us. Location is clearly very important for us because we do want to show our students that, give them the best time of their lives.
In Carcavelos, that would be very easy.
Yeah.
Because we're talking.
You study there?
No. It's a city between. So it's what would be the start of the Portuguese Riviera.
Yeah.
And it just has the business school, big university, with a 2-kilometer beach right in front.
Yeah. It's perfect.
I will send my daughters there.
Yeah, we're super excited about Carcavelos. I mean, it's going to be a dream location. But actually,
it sounds very like Swansea, doesn't it?
Yeah. Not at all.
I'm just going to take this question from Meer.
Yes, thank you. I would like to follow up on what Gert-Wim was saying. Also, I think Marcus and Dimphy what might be interested. But these would like to hear also your opinion on this. I see that Jaap is wearing his global sustainable development goals pin.
Yep.
And just a discussion about things that kind of the regulations and things that limit maybe the development, also including that, because I think when it comes to tenants, consumers, they are also thinking that these should be included.
Yep.
With the possibility of a bear market also coming, or at least less capital flowing in. How do you see that? How can you include that in your development now also, and also for the coming years to make sure that you live up to those goals and ideas behind those sustainable development goals in general, also sustainability in a wider sense?
You want me to take?
Maybe Gert-Wim.
Happy to answer that. First of all, the high ambition of the municipality is something that simply is there. It's a what you call conditio sine qua non. You have to cope with it, and we're happy to do that. But given also the other aspect, the increased cost price, etc., it becomes quite difficult to make that product work. What we see now is, which I'm very happy with, it. A lot of investors also can allocate extra budget to also increase on top of that some sustainability elements. So I think we all have to aim for that highest level. We are willing to do so, and we are investing in that. But you need alignment of interests also with the investor, with the municipality as well, because the municipality has also its role in there. Because sometimes what we see is that the high ambitions on sustainability on the one hand of the municipality conflicts with some other regulations or architectural demands of the city on the other hand. So it's really a game you have to play together and have to align those interests in order to get to that, highest level of sustainability.
What we do is, first of all, we set our goals on sustainability and impact. And we want to stay ahead. So be very ambitious on that. And there's a good reason for that. Because we're creating a dual return. It's really a financial return and the impact returns. And by doing so, preparing for the future, which you should, as a good investor, you are spreading out your capex. So you're making your returns more predictable for a unforeseen future, which is very attractive for investors who have long-term liabilities. In the end, those investors also have their convictions regarding ESG and SRI. We tap into that because it's very difficult for pension funds or insurance companies to be very pragmatic on an asset class like real estate. We can do this for them. And it's, in our view, this is our mission, you could say, we're creating a balanced value. It's not just the investor, but it's also the tenant, whether it be the residential tenant or the retail tenant. There are a lot of interests involved in residential, so we take all of these stakeholders, and you can look it up on our website. So we've created a value creation model, which is an integrated model in which we operate the company and also manage our investments. So we take on board how to engage tenants, what's good for tenants, and all the diversity what's in there. We're ambitious and we want to stay the best. We want to be worldwide. We're now number 3, which is good, but I want to be number 1. And it starts there.
We actually had a seminar in London, CMS, yesterday on ESG investing and sustainability, and we had about 100 investors in the room, and we used Slido actually to do a poll of the audience, and the majority of the investors agreed that tackling climate change and sustainability was now an urgent priority for the real estate sector, which I think is a shift from what maybe we've seen historically. But what sort of came out of the panel was we didn't just want to talk about policies and processes, but we actually needed people creating strategies and making positive choices to take this issue forward, which I think sounds like that's what you're doing within your business. So we need more of that.
It's also inevitable, because yesterday the report of the Dutch government came out of the advisor, and one of the parts of that is that the responsibility on the impact of real estate lies with the owner of the real estate. And that's a quite broad sentence, but this is one of the aspects. In the coming months, this will be further developed, but I think, we cannot hide behind it and look away, because we have this big nitrogen problem here in the Netherlands. 18,000 permits are freezed at the moment, and yesterday the report came out, so we all have to drive 100 kilometers an hour from next week, I believe. And also the half of the stock of the farmer, so 50% of the farming companies here in the Netherlands will be reduced. That's one of the things. So then that will also create a lot of space, I believe, for investments and for housing.
But in addition to that, I think the residential sector as an investment class can also learn a lot from other investment class. I think when it, for instance, the office sector is way more ahead when it comes to sustainability, technology, and what have you. So I think we can learn a lot from that sector and use those elements to the other investment class like residential.
I think ultimately, I mean, it's about your customer. We are serving a very particular customer who's, who's on that topic. And if we are not meeting those requirements, then we're going to lose our customer.
Exactly.
Quite apart from that, I think these days that financing requirements also are looking at your sustainability goals, and it's difficult to get a development on site if you are not looking at those and tackling those issues quite specifically.
Good, you could question that.
Yeah, and thanks Dimphy for that transition as well. But maybe to Jaap or to Clare, how are you guys measuring your return on investment in sustainability? Do you see any returns from being a leader in GRASP or, on your...
No, we apply a multi-layered approach to provide evidence to our investors on the sustainability or the ESG component of the investments. And it starts really on the bricks and mortar side, so you have the digital BIM, so you have all the construction materials, which is useful if you think ahead on recycling that material in the decades to come. That's one. So there's a building passport with all the facts and figures of a specific building, and we can identify all the construction materials on a new build, I have to say. Then we have the regular property level with BREEAM in use or GPR or any type of metrics, and there are some additional metrics. Then we apply on the portfolio, we apply GRASP and PRI and some additional metrics. And then we go to the investors and look at their conviction, and we match that in our reporting. That in itself is quite a comprehensive set of tools to measure the sustainability and also the ESG components in your portfolio. Will that develop? Yeah, it will develop in the years to come. Will there be additional? Yeah, there might be well certification and all kinds of things in there. And it belongs to our territory to provide the evidence on the return of the sustainability. In terms of the financial returns, it's a very simple equation. Every new build has to comply with our policy, which goes beyond regulation. And it's an investment. So it's very easy. If, for instance, we would team up with COD and we agree on the building specs, and we calculate the return, and it's an all-in return. So if we have a very green A minus energy index minus 0.9 building, and it meets our acquisition criteria, it's a good investment anyway.
So you're saying you can't put really a price tag on it, so it's a part of the whole picture.
You can on the let's say the more substantial components, you can put a price tag, but basically if you buy something from you, it's in the financial equation already, because we make a price.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And the price meets the return requirements. For instance, on existing stock, I might do a renovation, and on the substantial part, insulation, triple glazing, solar panels, it's very easy to make the calculation in the end. You know what it costs. You know what the reduction might be on the energy cost. You might shift some of the energy cost into the all-in rent, and you can calculate that. That's fine. Does it have to meet every time the maximum criteria? No, it doesn't have to meet that. Basically, I want a long-term investment in residential, which I know I can manage for 20 to 30 years with happy tenants, no vacancy. So that's basically the investment. So I don't look at each of the building blocks in the portfolio. Yes, as a manager we do, of course. But in the end, what I offer the investors is an investment on the portfolio side. If that's good, fine. And the evidence provided helps me to substantiate how green it is, how ESG it is, how everything in there. So I don't see it as a problem at all.
I would guess that after a while, because of who you are as an organization, the investors self-select because they identify with what you're accomplishing.
I think in the UK, certainly I think the talk at the moment is that maybe there's not a premium on valuation for buildings that meet certain green criteria, but actually going forward there's likely to be a discount on those buildings that are not achieving those standards. And as we have more regulation introduced, you're not going to be able to let your building unless it meets, sufficient energy standards. So the buildings that don't live up to that will then become discounted, so penalised that way.
I could share my experience with the other week. I was in a hotel investment seminar, which exactly this topic was at hand, and we also asked the room: are investors willing to put a premium on investment which are, you know, more sustainable. And up to a maximum of around 2%, there was a willingness to, but in general, they just expect it to be there. So if you don't comply with that, you will be out of business in the end as a developer, as an investor, as anyone in the industry. So it's not a question whether I do it or whether I don't do it. You just have to do it in order to remain in business.
Oh, sure. I mean, yes.
I have a question for Jaap from Bijl.
Yeah.
How do you define or calculate impact?
Okay.
Because you have a holistic, a holistic approach for the return on investment.
Yeah.
How is impact in that?
Yeah.
involved?
So basically, that's in the term dual return, which is you have a financial return alongside with positive impact on the stakeholders. And stakeholders being not just the investor side, the end investor, but also the tenants, and also the direct surrounding stakeholders surrounding the property you have. That could be some of your neighbors or your municipalities. So we have a program in place, and it's called the quality assessment model, in which we assess each asset in its location and the tenant if we create a positive impact in there. And if we, for instance, focus on the customer journey of our tenants, residential tenants, for instance, that's engaging with the tenants on what do you really need. So if there's car parking or bicycle parking, do you need some additional, maybe a place where you can fix the bike? What of those electric bikes are there? Do you have a plug-in? So taking care of that on a regular basis each year, there's an asset plan moving this quality upwards. And we measure it with the tenant satisfaction survey. And we use the tenant satisfaction survey again with this annual asset plan, which we demand from our asset managers. What are your recommendations? What are your measures you're going to take next year? What budget is involved? How are you going to do that? How are you going to execute that? And again, and again, and again. That's what we like.
You've got a question too, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Persistency. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
a comment to what Gert-Wim said before, because we're actually a huge believer of good certifications of the building, and what the building COD, Clare from Altera, sorry. COD built for us here with a BREEAM excellent rating. I think that was part of what Union, the investor who bought it, actually was one of the conditions that we actually reached that. So that is hugely important for us if we can and if in new buildings. But in our development strategy, we're looking for locations where you hardly ever anymore find the possibility of a green lawn to build upon. So oftentimes you have an existing building, and it can be more efficient to demolish, and often also you get a more better certified building. But we believe that to reuse existing buildings is the most sustainable thing. But on the other hand, you will not be able to reach the same side of, let's say, BREEAM or LEED certification than if you build new. So I think that's a factor which is not fully you cannot price it in, but to reuse an existing building, the concrete which is there and so on, instead of demolishing, that should be essential as well.
When it comes to conversion projects, indeed, the certification is a difficult thing. But then I use the analogy of swimming. If you have children, you want your children to be able to swim. That's the objective. It's not the objective to have their swim diploma. I mean, if you look at that way towards sustainability, you might have a different outcome of that idea.
Yeah, it should be a combination of the two, but certainly that's something which is not.
I wanted to pick on a couple of the things. One of which that came up was sense of community, and also just what people are actually looking for, because obviously if you're building something, as Jaap said, there for the next 20, 25, 30 years, you've kind of got to try and make sure that that's going to be almost future-proofed in terms of what not just this generation, but future generations are going to want. So I don't know if there are any points that anybody wants to pick up on either of those.
Yeah, I would, because it's one of our key pillars, or it is a key pillar for us as a investor, developer, and operator. What we are aiming to create is a complete connected community, and that means that we create a building in which we have student residents, hotel guests, co-workers and locals. Now, hotels have been an increasingly difficult topic in Europe in particular. Tourism is massively on the rise. We've seen, I think, 1.3 trillion trips in the last years. I mean, there's an exponential growth in tourism, and therefore creating hotels, as they are called, but this hybrid product is actually quite controversial. Particularly here in Amsterdam, in Spain, in Barcelona, there are also in other places that are very much welcomed because it's also obviously in a form of investment that is that's welcome in other cities. But here in the Netherlands, we're seeing an increasing sort of, well, in Amsterdam we have a hotel stop, but in other cities there is a restriction on hotel growth. And I think where I would like to make the case for the student hotel is that we are actually trying to create a community rather than this transient space where people just live for a couple of years and then leave again. What we want to do is indeed to keep them coming back to see us and to create a space where not only our students who are living there for a year or the short stay customers that stay for 2 weeks or even the hotel guests, but also the local residents feel a connection to the building. Our buildings have huge open communal spaces that are open to everyone in our.
How much percent of a building do you have for communal utilization?
No, it varies, but
ballpark,
if we're at a 20,000, so roughly between 5 and 10%. But from a generation, you see that, for example, our latest one in Florence has got. I can't remember, but I'll have to remain that one. But it's I think we've got about 5,000 square meters in Florence. At the moment, 2,000 square meters in city Amsterdam, and we're looking to expand that. So it really is about, but it's not just about the amount of space. It's about how well they're utilized. It's really about having an open door policy, giving you free Wi-Fi for everyone, making sure that you do programming that allows locals to come in. And that's what we focus on. So programming is an important part of that community. And, as a hotel product, we think it's really important that we're not this disruptive element in our local community, but actually something that enhances it. And to a certain extent, we've seen that we have been a catalyst for regeneration in certain parts of cities, like in The Hague and in Amsterdam West. We've been sort of pioneer in certain areas that nobody would have touched with the barge pole before. But that is, so I think we do that well. I hope we do that well, but it is extremely important to us.
Can I add something on community investments? Yeah. So basically on the residential side, we include all these age groups. So the young and the old and the middle-aged and all you have. But we include healthcare-related residential in there. And we really make an effort to team up with the social housing corporations. So if you think about urban lifestyles, it's the mixed use. It's not just the traditional functions, fitting in some retail, but it is creating a building which suits more purposes.
Yeah.
So purpose investment is also a very good word in here.
I think the boundaries between the traditional functions like working or living or the hospitality, it becomes more vague. So you see the co-working coming up, you see the co-living coming up, you see the hospitality industry, the hotels also now aiming for a combination with working space, etc. So it all becomes more blend. The next step would be that it also becomes a new and recognized investment class, because most of the investors we encounter are quite sectoral. Is that the word? Sectoral?
So traditional.
Sorry?
So traditional in their.
Yeah. So it needs to be either an office, either an hotel, or either a residential or retail. Whereas I think also in terms of future-proofness, sustainability, the combinations of all that, and the diversity will be a good thing and a good investment.
Although I have to say there's one, we've talked about the iGens, the millennials, and also the centennials, where there is quite a big group which is very average. Yeah. And where do they live and work? Well, they don't live in city center because they really can't afford it. And a type of community investments we do is we do take care of these multi-family, single-family houses in those, suburbs, which is still very attractive as an investment. But we have also these convenient shopping centers in there, and we really like that for several reasons. Because we think a good convenience center in the middle of a neighborhood has a community function. Especially if you add some health-related services in there. Think about the pharmacist or the GP. When there are schools nearby, then a convenience center has its service and its function for a lot of age groups who live in that neighborhood. It's not, fashion retail. No, it's just basic retail. In Dutch we would say, je gaat winkelen of je gaat boodschappen doen. You do your regular daily shopping over there. And you do that a lot if you're this average age group who lives in the neighborhoods, in the suburbs. Actually, we are creating those convenience centers to serve also as a community. And there are a lot of ways to do that. And that's a very good thing to do, also in the Netherlands, but also in other cities.
And there was a discussion there also around the mixed use side. Marcus, just picking up that mixed use and communities part of it, in your development, how much are you creating, I suppose, a mini neighbourhood in a way?
There's not a mini.
I think no, but in terms of, are you then putting in hotels? Are you putting in the sort of, convenience centres? Are you curating that to a certain extent? How are you doing that?
So, in the first project that we have, which is about 150,000 square meters, we're going to own the ground floor of everything. And we're going to have a hub, which is located more or less at the center.
Yeah.
Because we're a riverfront, what we are trying to do is we're going to have the businesses, we're going to curate the system so that the businesses that make sense and have added value from being 40 meters from the river are there. So the restaurants with the tables outside and things like that people want to enjoy the closeness to the river. And then we're going to move on to the second line. Your pharmacy, your laundry, the bank, maybe a kindergarten, things like that.
Yep.
And then what we will have is a hub. It's actually modeled into something that happens a lot. For example, if you know Madrid, Barcelona, and Lisbon, it's, in places like the Mercado San Miguel in Madrid or the Time Out Market in Lisbon.
Yep.
Which is kind of a food court, newsstand, and things that cater to the daily habits of the neighborhood. Right?
Good stuff. Yeah.
On the next project over, which is, so we had the one but last riverfront plot in Lisbon, and then we got the last. And that one is slightly bigger, it's almost 400,000 square meters, but because it used to be the logistical platform of the city 200 years ago, and it was industrial in terms of utilization, we have some structures left that are kind of round and metallic. And we want to keep the memory and the sense of place of what that area used to be and what it will become, or what it is becoming. So for example, we have an agreement with the government and the city authorities that those industrial structures, which are now hollowed out but still there. So I think something happened in London as well.
Yeah.
So those are earmarked for hotel utilization, and they are quite big. So it's very unlikely that we will partner up with one hotel brand or one hotel operator. And what we'll try to do is to get something different in those three, so that it makes sense and that everything is gelled together. We're going to have people living, we're going to have people who study. The university hospital, the largest in the country, will be 500 meters from there. So we want to have people of all types. And we don't do, for example, something that happens a lot in America, which is the gated community, closed in condominium. We don't do that. We have streets, and streets have sidewalks, and People can move in and out and circulate through, whether they live there or whether they just go there to go to the supermarket or to have a meal or to visit friends. It's not a closed thing that you're there and oh, this is my thing, nobody gets in. And I have the security guard. That's not what we're doing. We want to be part of the city.
Okay, good. We're almost right up at the end of the time. I just wanted to quickly tackle one thing which has always been at least a perceived barrier from investors who will say, okay, well if you're in student housing or if you're in senior living, assisted living, these things, really that's an operator business. So how do you work around that fact? How do you, I suppose, de-risk it by selecting the right operator? How do you solve that challenge?
Me?
Anybody?
Okay. I'll just do the tenant analysis. So we know exactly who's operating in the business. It's our choice not to be an operator, for instance, in healthcare. But we have this intense analysis of the prospective tenants, where they have to drum up their business plan, and we do the financial check and want to understand their strategy and tie in with the municipality on healthcare, for instance.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
We some time ago we converted an old building into a Alzheimer complex for Alzheimer patients, and we're totally not in the Alzheimer operational business whatsoever. But that tenant showed a good business plan, and so we were able to enter into a contract with them. But we need to do that business plan check and a financial check in order to get investment value, in order to sell it off to parties like Altera or other institutional investors.
And actually it's a two-way street, because my experience is on the healthcare providers is that they are a bit thinking, who are those investors? They are a bit distrusty towards investors, thinking, oh God, I'm totally dependent on an investor. So you build up the relationship. So the key thing is be open, be transparent, talk about the issues, talk about the solutions, and then you get there.
Okay, good. Does anyone have any other questions? In which case we'll finish with a quick one, which is for everybody really, which is you can either choose out of this sector, the subsectors, where do you think the most sensible place at the moment for future is to invest in, or alternatively, if you don't want to answer an investment question, what do you think the key trend is that you see in this kind of cradle to grave, that whole residential piece?
So of course in Portugal or the Netherlands, Amsterdam or Lisbon, we have to, we know that there are macro trends, European, global, whatever, and then you start zooming in. Right, and everybody knows what those are. They are widely reported on. We all know. So actually, what I do recommend you invest in is having the capabilities to interpret the data that is available, in how you use that in an insightful way. The capabilities for interpretation, the capabilities to develop a vision, and then the capabilities, your executional capabilities, so that you get quickly to the market and you have a significant first mover advantage, so that you're not then competing and doing the same thing that everyone else is doing at the same time that they're doing it. So that would be my recommendation: investing in knowing what to do, doing it first, having that advantage so that you can be differentiated and generate, at the end of the day, the income that is going to allow you to keep investors happy in a sustainable way. And that, of course, differs on who you are as a company and where you are as an operator.
Okay, good. Dimphy.
Well, I mean, I think from an investment perspective, I actually agree with Marcus, but I was thinking more along the lines of making sure that you are nimble enough as a property investor or a developer and operator. I see that quite often we're quite fast, but actually I've worked for other companies that are less quick to change your business model, to adapts to the changing environment. And I find that that's something that property really needs to focus on. Make sure your infrastructure and your people are nimble enough to be able to change your product. And that kind of blurs it. It kind of ties into the trends where we're getting this blurred product where you are servicing a cross section of people, and that's something that you need information to be able to get the mix right, but you need to be flexible. So we're investing more and more in flexible solutions for our buildings so that we can have a longevity as well of our investment. So I think if that summarizes what we're investing in and how we're tapping into the latest trends.
Okay, good. Hein.
Yeah, I'm not an investor, but just a lawyer and also a consumer. And I hear investors talking about concepts and the future of living, and I think it's very interesting. But another interesting topic, or I think a challenge, the biggest challenge we have, is the affordability of living, because that's what's worrying me really. I live in a house and it's all fine, but the next generation, where do they live? Can they afford to live in Amsterdam? And that's also, I think, a topic which investors, developers, must bear in mind, that they also have a responsibility. Another thing is then when you invest in something, I would say in the residentials for older people, I think that's an asset class for the coming years to invest in really.
Great.
Well, thank you, Hein. You just took one of my trends. There was indeed affordability. It's affordability, it's sustainability, but also mobility. I think we are not able to comprehend and imagine enough to see what that mobility goes, what direction that it goes to. I think 10 years from now, no one of us will probably coming with their own car or driving its own car. I mean, that will become an increasingly interesting aspect, which has also very much a real estate component when it comes to the parking norms the municipality puts upon new developments or the whole infrastructure in cities and the whole delivery of goods, etc. So I think that will become an aspect that you have to incorporate in your new projects, and that will be part of the new investment.
Interestingly, increasingly in London, people are giving up cars for certain. I mean, I think that's definitely happening. Claire?
I just want to finish on something that is maybe shaping the market going forward, and has actually surprised me over the time that we've been doing these launches, and it's how open the real estate sector is to regulation. I think maybe we all think, oh, we don't want regulation, just leave us to it, we can sort ourselves out. But interestingly, in the report, we asked both consumers and real estate professionals whether there should be more regulation to protect tenants. And interestingly, 50% of real estate professionals actually agreed that there should be, which I was quite surprised about. And interestingly, again, when we had our ESG seminar yesterday, over half of the investors also agreed that we needed more regulation around sustainability to take that forward as well. So I think that's been quite an eye-opener in terms of maybe how open the real estate sector is to this.
One small remark, maybe a good topic for research. We're talking about affordability. Look at the income side. So what's created the problem, by the way? The lack of income growth over the last 20 to 30 years. And who's to blame for that? But that's the other side. Take a look at it. Cradle to grave, this grave thing, that sounds a bit depressing. But we fully, from our point of view, we're actually in people business. We're not in bricks and mortar, we are in people business. We're in life cycle investment, so we're focusing on the residential side. And we do think that it's all about creating this dual return, financial and all the other returns. So if you center focus the client, which is on the one hand the investor, but on the other hand it's the tenant, that's a major big step in developing your strategy. And yes, you said that, Marcus, it's about having skills to execute the strategy. So taking, you know, a step into the future to make the future foreseeable that aligns itself with your investors. And we do think is that it's about creating this impact and be able to show it, not just to say it, but to show it constantly. That comes with the business. So basically, those are the, you know, my 2 bits on your last question.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.